In this video, we are going to be discussing the U.S. system of measurement. We're going to go through length, volume, and mass. And we have these tables of conversion factors. And you'll see that there are two columns. And then there's rows. What I've done is on the left side, I've shown the conversion factor, so 12 inches equals 1 foot, for example, with the units fully written out. But then this second column, what I've shown you is abbreviations. So this box here, it's the same conversion as this box here, and that will be true for all of the tables in this section going forward. Okay. So I want to start with a pretty simple one. You can probably do this in your head. 24 inches, we're going to convert that into feet. And the reason why I want to start with this is to show you a process of how you can solve these problems. That way, when you're dealing with harder to work with units, you have a system in place for solving the problem. And that process we're going to talk about is called dimensional analysis. So let's take this conversion factor. 12 inches equals 1 foot. What I'm going to do is divide this side by 1 foot. And you'll see why in a minute. Now, whatever I do to one side, I have to do it to the other side. If I have feet divided by feet, units cancel just like numbers do, so those go away. And I end up with 12 inches divided by 1 foot. These are different units, so they don't cancel. Equals 1 over 1, which is 1. So essentially what I've done is I've created a fraction that is equal to 1. And that will be important in a minute. Now I could have gone the other way. So I'm starting with the same conversion factor, but now rather than dividing both sides by 1 foot, I'm going to divide both sides by 12 inches. Inches cancel. 12 divided by 12 is 1. And I have the fraction 1 foot divided by 12 inches. So these two fractions that I have boxed are exactly like this conversion factor here. It's really just 3 different ways to write the same conversion factor. Okay, so let's actually work on the problem. 24 inches. I'm going to write down my given information first. We know that if we multiply a number by 1, we're really not changing it in any way. So if you look here, we have 2 fractions that are equal to 1. So if we multiply 24 inches by either of these fractions, we're multiplying it by 1, and we're not really changing the number in any way. So what I want to do, my goal is to get rid of inches, and I want my answer to be in feet. So if I need inches to cancel, remember we can always put this as over 1. If I need inches to cancel and it's on the top, it needs to go on the bottom here. And then I want to get into feet, so that needs to go on the top. And we look to our 2 fractions. Which fraction has that situation? This one here. 1 foot divided by 12 inches. So we've canceled our inches, we're left with the units of feet. Once you've figured out your units, you do the math. 24 times 1 is 24, divided by 12 is 2. Let's try another example, this time dealing with weight or mass. We want to convert 0.025 tons, and I'm going to use a capital T as the abbreviation for tons, We want to convert it into ounces. So I know I want tons to go away, so I'm going to put it down here. And my final answer, I want it to be in ounces. However, if you look at this table of conversion factors, I don't see one where we're going directly from tons to ounces. I do see tons to pounds right here. And then once we have pounds, we can get into ounces. So in this case, we're going to have to do 2 steps. My first step is to use this conversion factor. 2,000 pounds is 1 ton. We already determined we want it tons on the bottom, so pounds must go on the top. 2,000 is associated with the unit pounds, so it has to go up here. And then the number 1 is associated with tons, so it has to go down here. And at this point, you can solve, but you're in pounds, not ounces. So you'd have to do another conversion factor, or you can just string these fractions along. So we don't want pounds. It's on the top. We need to put it on the bottom so it'll cancel. And we want to get into ounces. Our table says 16 ounces equals 1 pound. So now we multiply 0.025 times 2,000 times 16, and we get the answer of 800 ounces. Let's try a third example, this time dealing with volume. Now, there is one thing I want to point out before we get into this problem. Do you notice here we have ounces written? And in the previous table, when we were talking about mass, we also had ounces. So whenever you're dealing with ounces, you want to be really sure, am I dealing with weight or am I dealing with volume? Because with volume, there's 8 ounces in a cup. But when you're dealing with weight or mass, there's 16 ounces in a pound. So that's just something to watch out for with your problems. Okay, so we want to convert 65 teaspoons into cups. The abbreviation for teaspoon is a lowercase t. So let's see, where do we see teaspoons on this chart? We see it right here. And that's the only place. We want to get into cups ultimately. So there's cups here, there's cups here, and there's cups here. So I'm not really sure what conversion factor I'm going to use for cups, but I only see teaspoons in one place. So that means I must need to go from teaspoons to tablespoons. So that's what I'll do first. I want teaspoons to cancel, so I'm going to put it on the bottom, and tablespoons goes on the top. There's 1 tablespoon for 3 teaspoons. Now I'm in tablespoons. Let's look on the chart and see, where do we see tablespoons? Well, we see it here, but we just used that. So if we use this conversion factor again, we'd just be going backwards, back into 65 teaspoons. So we're not going to use this. Okay, I see tablespoons here. 2 tablespoons equals 1 ounce. I want to get rid of tablespoons, so I'm going to put it on the bottom so it cancels. And I'm going to go into ounces. And the conversion factor is 1 ounce is 2 tablespoons. All right, we ultimately want to get into cups. We're in ounces. So we're going to look at our table again. I see ounces here. And actually, this is good because I see ounces here and I want to get into cups. So this is probably the conversion factor that we're going to use. The only other place I see ounces is right here, but we just used that conversion factor to get out of table students. So again, you wouldn't want to use that because that would just get you right back to where you started. So we're going to use this conversion factor, 8 ounces equals 1 cup. We want ounces to cancel. It's on the top here, so it needs to be on the bottom here. We want to get into cups, and the conversion factor says there's 1 cup for 8 ounces. All right, all the units have canceled except for cups. So at this point, we do our calculation. We're going to do 65 divided by 3, and then divide it by 2, and then divide it by 8. However, some people don't like to do that. There is another way that you could do this. So you could multiply your tops. So 65 times 1 times 1 times 1, that's 65. Then you could multiply your bottoms. 1 times 3 is 3, times 2 is 6, times 8 is 48. And once you have this fraction, then you can divide it and get it into a decimal number. And when I do that, I get 1.3541, 6, and the 6 is repeating, cups. Now you don't actually have to write this whole number down. When you're working your homework, you'll be told where to round, but you can also look back to your original number to figure that out, and we'll talk more about that in Chapter 5. So I know from the Chapter 5 rules that I would round this to 1.4 cups. Here is a summary page of all the different, well, this isn't all the different US conversion factors, but they're very common ones that you're going to encounter in this class. You do not need to memorize this table. I will give you a printout of this for your exam. You just need to know how to read and use this table, so be aware of that. Okay, let's do a few more examples. Now we're going to be talking about writing in standard notation. So the most common places where we see standard notation is when we're talking about our height or when we're talking about time. So let me give you an example. If I am 5 feet 9 inches, that's generally how we say it. We say how many feet are we and then how many inches are we. This would be in standard notation. What I've done is I've given you the larger unit of feet. I've given you a whole number. And then I've broken down the remainder into the next largest unit, which would be inches. So I could have said that I am 5.75 feet tall, but this is generally the form that we report heights. So feet and then inches, bigger unit and then next biggest unit. I also could have reported this simply in inches, 69 inches. But again, we generally don't do this. We generally report it in standard notation. Another example would be for class lengths. A lot of times during the regular semester, a class is 1 hour and 25 minutes long. So we have the larger unit of hours. I've given you a whole number. And then I've broken up the remainder into the next largest unit of minutes. We don't generally say the class is 1.42 hours long. I guess you could, but generally we write it in standard notation. So let's look at this example. We want to express 5 feet 14 inches in standard notation. So the issue is right here. 14 inches, we know that's greater than 1 foot. So I'm going to subtract 12 inches from this, and I'm left with 2 inches. The reason why I did that is because 12 inches is 1 foot. So we're going to take that 1 foot and add it onto the 5 feet. So if you're talking about somebody's height, you wouldn't say they are 5 feet 14 inches. You would say they're 6 feet, and then the remainder of inches is 2 inches. Let's try the next one. 6 pounds 30 ounces. So you have a baby and they are 6 pounds 30 ounces. We wouldn't report the ounces like this because we know that there are 16 ounces in a pound. I'm going to subtract out 16 because that is 1 pound. 30 minus 16 is 14. And then the thing you don't want to forget is to add that over to the bigger unit. So this baby is 7 pounds and then the remainder of 14 ounces. This third one here, we're going to express 65 teaspoons in standard notation. Now, teaspoons is actually quite a small unit already, so we want to get it into a larger unit. Teaspoons would be here, and then the next largest unit would be tablespoons, and then after that would be ounces, and I'm leaving blanks here so we can fill in the numbers, and then the next largest unit would be cups. There's a few different ways that you can approach this. You want to do what kind of makes sense to you. So what I'm going to do is convert 65 teaspoons into the next largest unit. So I'm going to start here with 65 and I'm going to convert into the next largest one. So there are 3 teaspoons for every tablespoon, which means that we're going to end up with 21 tablespoons and then a remainder of 2 teaspoons. Oh, I'm sorry, 3 teaspoons. I'll just cross that off. So 65 teaspoons is the same thing as 21 tablespoons with 3 teaspoons left over. Now what I'm going to do is take this and convert it into the next biggest unit, ounces. 21 tablespoons. There are 2 tablespoons. Now let me write it over here. I can't write down that far. 21 tablespoons. There are 2 tablespoons for 1 ounce. So when I do 21 divided by 2, I end up with 10 ounces. And I'm not writing this in decimal form just because we are converting it into standard form. So standard form is basically trying to avoid decimals. 21 divided by 2 would be 10 ounces, and then with 1 tablespoon remaining. So now we have 3 teaspoons, 1 tablespoon, 10 ounces. Finally, I need to go from ounces to cups. And we're dealing with volume now, so there's 8 ounces for 1 cup. 10 divided by 8 would be 1 cup with 2 ounces remaining. So our final answer would be 1 cup, 2 ounces, 1 tablespoon, and 3 teaspoons. That was a pretty challenging one. Okay, final couple examples. We want to add together numbers that are in standard notation. So we're going to add 1 cup, 3 ounces, plus 2 cups, 6 ounces. 3 ounces plus 6 ounces is 9 ounces. 1 cup plus 2 cups is 3 cups. This isn't our final answer though, because there were only 8 ounces in a cup. So we have more ounces than 8. I'm going to subtract out 8 ounces. And we're left with 1 ounce. And then don't forget to add that on here. So our final answer would be 4 cups, 1 ounce. Okay, last one. Subtract 0.5 yards from 3 feet 11 inches. So we're going to subtract 0.5 yards. Now the problem here is we don't have yards anywhere up here. And since we're dealing with standard notation, I am going to convert yards into feet and inches. If we look at the conversion factors, we see that, here it is right here, 3 feet is 1 yard. So I'm going to do 0.5 yards, 3 feet is 1 yard. So that's 1.5 feet. However, we're dealing with standard notation, so I'm going to say that's 1 foot, 6 inches. Okay, so we're going to take 3 feet, 11 inches, and subtract half a yard, which we convert it into 1 foot, 6 inches. That's 5 inches, that's 2 feet, and actually we don't have to do anything more because in order to get a foot out of here you would have to have 12 inches or more, and we only have 5. So 2 feet, 5 inches is our final answer.